So as you can see, I have a model here in Maya, and it has some quite specific reflections at the surface. These reflections were captured using high dynamic range images, using a 360-degree panoramic technique, and then mapped to the surface in Maya through spherical mapping. In order to place them at the site, I used an augmented reality app called Layar, which works on your smartphone, and I located them at the site of Mount Eden in a couple of ways. Firstly, through print triggers, essentially attached to signs around the place that people could activate through their phones, providing they had the Layar app. And secondly, through geolayers, which users could essentially kind of walk around on a little trail around the mountain. The advantage of this was that Maungawhau, Mount Eden, is a very high density area. It attracts 1.2 million visitors a year, and it's probably, well, it's about the size of Victoria Park outside. So it's very high density, and it is certainly in a fragile ecological state. You know, parts of it have been concreted. It receives a lot of traffic with tour buses. Fortunately, the summit has just been blocked to tour bus traffic because it was causing a lot of erosion. But on one side of the mountain, what you find are essentially kind of muddy tracks that people can walk, which is very beautiful, but also not, you know, very sustainable in terms of caring for the mountain itself. The history of the mountain is actually that it was a fortress, a Māori fortress, between the 11th and the 17th centuries, and about 2,000 people lived there. So as you'll see in a moment when we start looking at the site, it's been extensively shaped by human hands. So let's have a little look at Google Maps. Here it is here, going to the beautiful city of Auckland. And I couldn't resist putting my house in here because it's just across the road. If any of you want to pop in for a cup of tea, now you know where I am. That's it there. So I kind of started this project basically by walking across the road, and gee, it's hard to talk and look at my video. Oh, there we go. That was my first object there. That's on the side of a former marae or meeting place. It's called Te Kohangahanga, has a water reservoir. The second site was here in a little sort of depression which was quarried called Tahaki Reserve. And I had another 4 sites located around the crater and also around the terraces and middens which you find here. This is a street view. As you can see, mountain in the background. It's kind of a mixed residential sort of area. Maungawhau means mountain of the foul tree. And here's a foul tree. It's kind of spiky. You don't really want to get one on your foot, but it has a nice flower. You can access the mountain via car, or even better, you can walk. So my print triggers and geolayers were littered about the mountain, but on trails which I felt would be in sustainable positions and would kind of encourage participants to keep off these areas which are in danger. Do not enter the crater. That's because there's a man covered in fire whose wife stole his clothes. You have to watch out for those Māori deities. They will attack you. And there are a number of people using this for recreational and tourism, about 1.2 million a year. But when you get up there, there's really nothing for you to do. I don't know if any of you have ever been tourists in New Zealand, but it's very beautiful. But there aren't really that many kind of structured activities, you know, if you want to avoid the cheesy tour bus sort of thing. So my kind of idea of the geolocated virtual sculpture trail was to sort of guide people who are maybe independent tourists around to areas which were going to be, you know, safe and sustainable for the ecology of the site. As you can see, it has a pretty amazing view. Those little white markers are delineating heritage areas where there is sort of regeneration of either native flora and fauna, or there's been erosion. This mountain was used for farming for quite a number of years, probably about almost 80 years. Recently they've taken the cows away so the grass has grown a bit. These depressions here are actually middens. They're probably about 600 years old and they're quite archaeologically important. This is a midden that's 800 years old, and at the time when the mountain supported 2,000 people, they used to store their crops in there, taro, kumara, root vegetables. You know, I've placed an object in there right now. This one's based on, I have a kind of mixed heritage. My great-grandmother's from a tribe called Te Raroa, which is a Northland tribe, and one of the artefacts that they dug up probably in the 1940s was called the Kaitaia lintel, and it's from the 15th century, so sort of a time of like very early Polynesian migration, and it's very sort of traditional looking, but actually it's also very future, what I would call future primitive. And I based my forms a lot on that, and I wanted to create a sort of combination of, I suppose, primitive artifacts and, you know, a layering with, you know, modern technology, and also, you know, try to cite them in a meaningful way in the environment. I can't really hear the audio so well. Oh, there we go. But these are obviously all field recordings, and they've been blended together to, you know, amplify what you can hear of traffic noise in the city, but also trying to sort of keep a blend with the natural ecology of the site, bird life, etc. More heritage protection signs, as you can see, they're everywhere. You know, in an effort to keep 1 million visitors a year off, it doesn't always work. What you find a lot of the time is that the mountain just degrades into muddy tracks. So that increases erosion. That's part of the water reservoir, which is on the site of the former marae. Some of my print triggers were located up there, kind of guiding people around to more sustainable areas of the site. And that's a pretty awesome view from one of the plateaus. Can't really argue with that. Always nice to see a nice picture in the afternoon, eh? So, yeah, there's a lot of challenges that the site is facing. For example, there's a new unitary plan. I don't know what your council planners are like in Sydney. Ours are absolutely atrocious. They take pride in being really bad. So they've just brought a new rule in allowing extra high buildings next to this beautiful mountain. So that's going to be bad. And here we can see very closely the high dynamic range reflection maps of the model's surface. I captured as many of my reflection maps on the same day so that they'd have a kind of consistency about them. And the video plates are captured at the same time, all obviously composited in After Effects. The video plate looks like a still, but it's actually over a longer period, over about 6 minutes. So as we watch this, you'll see the sun slightly recede. These are very faceted surfaces from a non-manifold geometry. So in terms of trying to reduce my polygons and put my models into an augmented reality app, it was pretty difficult. I couldn't just simply hit reduce polygon in Maya, and really I don't like herding birds around all day. So what I actually did to solve that problem was to embed the video at the site. That created a whole lot of problems of its own, because of course when you're downloading video from a cellular network, you can only do it at 600 kilobytes per second. So that is going to result in quite a small, kind of lower quality video. So yeah, another challenge, but I felt it was worth it because I really wanted to create a strong relationship between the user, the site, and the model. And in a minute, so that you can see the contrast, we're going to go into the very cold environment of Maya. Any 3D modelers in the room? Great, not too many, so I won't be revealing my lack of knowledge. So here we are, the cold environment of Maya, with no high dynamic range reflection. As you can see, it's pretty boring. Shades of battleship grey. If you like grey, that's a good thing, but for my purposes, it wasn't particularly useful. As you can see, there are lots of facets to these models, but they're also very modular. They're actually 6 pieces, and to keep consistency across my series of 6, I reconfigured them in different forms, and each time I tried to think of a different ancient Māori artefact to imitate. And so this one here is based on one called the Kaitaia lintel. And I've got a few different ones coming up as well. As you can see, they're very slow, balletic. Ferdinand Leisure's Ballet Mécanique was obviously an influence, and the New Zealand modernist Len Lai, modernist filmmaker, who some of you may have heard of. I also have a Croatian ancestry, and I was quite influenced by the Yugoslav post-World War II monuments. Some of you may know, hoping to go and see them one day, but they were very large and commissioned by Tito at the end of World War II. Many of them have been defaced now, but they're fantastic examples of large-scale monuments in a natural environment. And here we go, just to see the contrast. You're going to have a look at the Maya environment with the HDR. So, those of you familiar with modelling will recognise this as a spherical map. It looks just like a globe or a world. There it goes, it's turning around just like the real world. This was taken from near Tātaki Reserve, which was sort of a site that was quarried to provide scoria for the streets of Auckland. Another interesting thing about the mountain is over the years it's actually shrunk. It's actually 3/4 of its original size because unfortunately the materials it's made of are also very excellent for asphalt and roading. And there's my wee model. Full of vertices. Lots of faces in that one, impossible to reduce. But let's take a look around. Now, as you can see, you can't see anything on the surface of the model yet. That's because we're going to need to do a quick render, which is going to happen very soon. For those of you not familiar with the pleasures of watching rendering, I can tell you it's pretty damn exciting. You're about to see some now. I know, brace yourselves. So, this process for me, this is the first part of the process, and soon we're going to look at how I located these models in real space. It's a work in progress, it's a very long-term project. Prior to this, I'd done one around the university which I attend, Elam School of Fine Arts at University of Auckland, and I'd actually mapped all of those into Google Maps. But I'd done it quite so seamlessly that a lot of the comments I was getting were like, wow, where is this place? It's amazing. And I'm thinking, wow, you don't know what a 3D model looks like. That's awesome. So that's part of the fun of it, really. You get to engage in a bit of fakery. And here we go, back to our model. So just really to give you a bit of an idea of the process, and I'll let that play for a moment. The water reservoir under the former marae was a real inspiration for the soundtrack. Also under the mountain there are actually some quite significant lava caves. They reckon that the lava caves underneath the mountain were formed by something like 40 tennis courts full of lava over eruption periods of about 400 years. So here we go, this is our first step to locating them. First technique I used was actually using print triggers, postcard sizes, which I scattered around on little signs. There's one on the coast-to-coast walkway. As you can see, they're really just little signs, but they're very useful for guiding people about the place. Most people now have smartphones, and it's a really useful way to try and engage an audience. There you can see it working. I have to apologise for the bad bad video quality. On the day I had a lens that was actually good for a metre away from the subject. So the pictures weren't the sharpest, but here you can see this is what the full image looks like. So yeah, as you can see there, shapes very reminiscent of carving. You know, I'm a bit of a repressed sculptor. I've always wanted to carve in real life, but never really had the skills. So yeah, modelling in Maya is kind of my equivalent. And then this is the second method for triggering augments that I used, which was using geolayers. So geolayers are obviously triangulated via GPS, so you take your coordinates of latitude and longitude and you insert them into an augmented reality app. It's actually, even though the app's called augmented reality, it is mixed reality, right, because it's not immersive. Obviously, at the end of the day, you're carrying a little device which is this big. So there's a lot of kind of interaction between the scale of the environment, which is always going to be 360 degrees, the user who's at that locus, and your very small device. So here we go, that's triggering at the site of the former marae. As you can see, we've got a geospot right there, blue. As a user, you can walk around the hill and find these different spots. So kind of like a little self-directed trail. And there's one there. As you can see, when I took the footage, I was talking, so I had to delete that audio. Terrible surface reflections. That one's a little bit better. So yeah, when I'm making these, I really try to think in terms of scale, model, site, and surface, and also, you know, trying to sort of direct people to, you know, methods of moving around the mountain which are going to be a little more ecologically sustainable than maybe the ad hoc forms of tourism which are currently going on, which finds people in, you know, a lot of heritage areas where there is plant regeneration and also erosion. So that's really me. It's probably got a minute for questions.